Thank you for joining the Connect Learning to Working Credential Registry Publishing Options webinar. We are pleased that you were able to join us today. I am Jeannie Kitchens, Chief Technology Services Officer with Credential Engine. And along with me today, your presenters will be Nate Argo, Associate Solutions Architect, Julia Gianalis, our Accounts and Publishing Manager, and Mike Parson, Senior Solutions Architect. And I'd also like to acknowledge Cadence Calexto, who will be dropping links in the chat, and Sneha Dula, who helped build the tools that we are going to demonstrate for you today. With Credential Engine, our mission as a nonprofit is to map the credential landscape with clear and consistent information. And we do that through deep and lasting partnerships and collaborations, development and provision of open technologies, including the credential transparency description language and the credential registry, and by providing guidance on policy. Today, our topics are going to be an introduction to the credential transparency description language, education to work terms, and that will be presented by Nate Argo. Then we're going to take a look at the data publishing and consuming options that are available for the job, occupation, work role, and tasks classes with the CTDL, and that will be presented by Mike Parsons. And then Julia will provide an introduction to our work classes bulk upload and provide a live demonstration. At Credential Engine, we develop and provide a suite of open technologies. Foundational to all of these technologies is the credential transparency description language. We have a suite of publishing tools, and today our focus is going to be specifically on a demo of a publishing tool that we call the bulk upload. And that data goes into the credential registry that collects and connects all of this data together and makes it available so others can use that data in the registry. They can consume it into many kinds of tools, powering ecosystems. The CTDL is a very large language, and this slide here shows an image with a lot of pictures on the right-hand side. And if you look at some of those little circles there, you can see that they're labeled. And so, for example, you can see job, occupation, work role, task, and you can also see things like credential, learning program, pathway, course. This is all the types of information that the CTDL covers. And the arrows are notional to indicate that all that data can be linked together. And today we're going to be focusing on job, occupation, work role, and task, and how they can link to competencies and things like credentials. So let me give you an introduction to the CTDL education to work terms. This is a credential transparency infographic that is available to anyone to download from our website. And it's really important because credential transparency provides a guiding light to better navigate the numerous pathways to credentials into the workforce and toward achieving goals. This infographic depicts how credential transparency is a shared benefit for all stakeholders. Credential providers can more clearly describe the credentials they offer. Employers can discover the people who have the skills and competencies needed for the jobs of today while signaling for the jobs of tomorrow. Learners and workers can understand the different credentials available to them and how they link to jobs. And policymakers can better support and inform people to meet talent and economic needs. There continues to be a skills gap in the American workforce between workers' competencies and the skills needed for the 21st century. It is critically important to do everything we can to get people everything they need to get educated and trained for in-demand jobs and for lifelong employability. It's necessary to provide the data and tools people need to answer their questions. Credential transparency helps answer these questions by pulling data across all kinds of sources, education and training providers, employers, and agencies into one common and clear language, the Credential Transparency Description language. The CTDL is big, and we're going to take a look at one part of it for the Education to Work classes. And we're going to kind of focus here on how the Education to Work classes can link through competencies to things like credentials, learning programs, assessments. So for the first time, the entire supply and demand story related to skills can be described in the same open data format and used by important tools helpful to our communities. The Education to Work classes provide essential terms that are going to bridge the gap between learning and working. And today we're going to focus on these four, what we're called CTDL classes on the right: job, occupation, work role, and task. As you learn more about this today, you're going to see how these four classes all link together to provide important information that can be published to the credential registry. And I am going to turn it over to Nate Argo. Nate.
All right. So the next few slides, we're going to take a look, as Jeannie mentioned, at how these classes link together. And rather than show all of that at once at the start, we're going to just kind of go through each of these and show you what links to what and how those connections work. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Starting with occupation. You see the occupation is linked to a job primarily. So the difference between an occupation and a job, it's the way that we characterize it, is that a job would be offered by an organization directly, whereas an occupation is a more high level or generic, if you want to put it that way, description of the types of things that jobs are. But anyway, an occupation can be linked to a credential. An occupation can be asserted by an organization. That means that an organization is saying, we're describing this occupation even if we don't offer it. So that could be like a state government describing occupations within that state. The occupation can be linked down at the bottom there to competencies. And I think the last one got cut off a bit, but to concepts as well. And we'll go into what concepts are in a little bit. The occupation can also have work roles, and we'll take a look at what work roles are in a moment. And it can also be linked to tasks. Next slide, please. And so jobs, as I mentioned, are directly offered by an organization. So a person could get a job. A person wouldn't get an occupation, but their job can be classified as an occupation. Job can either require a credential or in some cases be required by a credential, but generally you'll see a job requires a credential. Similar to occupations, jobs can also have work roles and tasks, so you have those connections there as well. Jobs can also, of course, embody competencies and have a number of properties that link to concepts. And again, we'll go into what concepts are here in a little bit. Next slide. So work role, the way that we characterize that is essentially a collection of tasks, as the description in the upper left there says, which essentially means that a role that someone might have, you might have a set of tasks you do, you might have several work roles within a job. Jobs can be comprised of multiple overlapping work roles, so there's kind of an organizational, almost a hierarchy to it that we build out here. So the work role, again, is asserted by an organization. It is connected to tasks because it is a collection of tasks. And the work role itself can also be linked to competencies and described via a number of concepts. Next slide, please. So the task is kind of the smallest unit of describing what someone does as part of their work. Tasks can have subtasks, which can have subtasks and so on, to get as granular as is necessary to describe them. So you can have a hierarchy starting with a job. Job can have multiple work roles. Each work role can have a set of tasks. Each of those tasks can have subtasks and so on. So it gives you a sort of a powerful hierarchical structure for not only categorizing, but also describing every aspect of what someone does in their work. So a task, again, asserted by an organization. Tasks are linked up to competencies and to concepts to better describe them. And next slide, please. So this slide here kind of shows everything linked up to everything, and this is why we didn't start with this slide. We wanted to go through each of these individually, but you can see that kind of no matter what your starting point is, you can link up to the other objects that are necessary to help describe it. And the competency, which I guess we haven't really covered, the competency is a sort of blanket umbrella term for any kind of knowledge, skill, ability, habit of mind, behavior, various other things like that. We use that as a broad way to get into what someone learns as they're pursuing a course, the requirements for a credential. All of that can be competency based, and then competencies, of course, are linked to the work classes. So the next couple of slides here go into some more specific examples. So here we see an occupation on the lower left here. That occupation is linked to a task. Just one task in this case. Obviously, in the real world, there would be a number of tasks here. Both of those are linked to the same competency. That competency is required by a certificate. So you can see again, by reusing the same competency data, you can say, okay, someone who has this competency because they have the certificate, because they went through the process of earning that certificate, they may be better at doing this task, which may make them a better fit for this kind of occupation. You can kind of get into those kinds of assertions and conclusions. Next slide, please. So here we have another example. We have a job on the lower left there. That job is made up of a number of work roles, one of which we see on the lower right. That work role has a number of tasks, one of which we see on the upper right here. And as before, each of those things is linked to the same competency, which is required to earn a bachelor's degree. So again, you can think if someone goes through the process, earns this bachelor's degree, they're going to have a number of competencies. This competency here happens to be required for this task. It's also mentioned by the work role and by this job. So someone who has, this set of competencies may be a good fit for doing these tasks, for performing these work roles, or for having this kind of job.
Hey, before we go on, could you just talk a little bit more about this little diagram here and how it is identifying, in this case, a specific job, a solutions developer?
Sure. So each of the arrows that are hanging off each of these circles here, point uses a different property in CTDL. So you'll have the type of each thing linked off of them. You'll have the name for the job, solutions developer. You have the description of it, which tells you what a solutions developer does. On the lower part of that, you have the occupation type, which in this case is a link to, I believe that is an ONET occupation code.
Yes.
SOC code. You have a keyword here, just one in this case, but keyword could have multiple values, user interface here. And that job, if you follow the has work role arrow, links out to the work role on the lower right. So again, same set of properties. You've got type, you've got name, you've got description, and the work role has a task, which links up to the task on the upper right there. So task has a name property, but not all tasks will have names. Tasks generally they will always have a description, because you have to describe what a task is. Sometimes those have names, but in this case we don't. So use Visual Studio and other tools to maintain Credential Finder user interface. So you notice that description is specific to that job. And you'll notice that each of those objects has a skill embodied arrow that points to that competency. So skill embodied basically means that this task, this work role, this job embodies this skill as described by this competency. So if you look at the competency text, again, not all competencies have names, but they do always have descriptions. End-to-end web development, including design, construction, updates, and maintenance. So you see all of that competency has something to do with each of these other objects here. And again, you would earn that competency. One of the ways you could earn that competency is via the bachelor's degree, is because in order to get that bachelor's degree, you'd have to obtain that competency, through the coursework or through assessments proving that you have it, etc. So in essence, that bachelor's degree requires that competency, which is then used for that task, for that work role, for that job. So the next few slides here list out the properties for the classes we just went over. I'm not going to read through all of these, but the idea is that you can see a description of not only what the class is at the top here, but also the list of properties that are used to describe it. Some of these properties are text-based, so they'll be like things like name, description, keywords, things like that. Some of them link off to other objects. In fact, I think most of them link off to other objects, which could be, say, an occupation linking to a job and so on. A number of them link out to what we called concepts, and I mentioned that we would go into what concepts are. That is after this set of slides, so hold on to that thought just a little bit longer. So here we have the occupation. You can see it has this sort of standard set of properties, as well as things like industry type, occupation type. So the reason that an occupation class would have an occupation type is that there's a subtle difference there. An occupation class is something that is described by an organization, published to the registry, whereas an occupation type is the SOT codes, for example. So you can say that the occupation we're describing falls under the umbrella of this set of SOT codes. And there's other properties here as well.
One other point to make here as we're looking at these slides is that every single term in the CTDL has a definition. And so now everyone has seen, for example, the definition of occupation multiple times in the prior slides. But every one of these terms down here that are for describing an occupation all have a definition. So every single term in the CTDL is defined. If I were to follow these links, you would see the definition for each one of these terms for describing an occupation.
Right. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the majority of those terms get reused here for describing a job. So the way that CTDL works is we have a set of classes, like we just went over. We have a set of properties, which you're looking at now. Those properties, as Jeannie mentioned, do have definitions, and those properties get reused by those classes because the definitions for those properties are independent of the class in which they are found. So if you see a comment, or if you see a name, if you see a description, it's going to mean the same thing, kind of no matter where you are in the schema.
Yeah, we can also see that we can do pretty rich descriptions of occupations, of jobs. But I also want to point out kind of the tail end comment on this definition of a job. It says a job describes an abstraction or template that specific job postings or openings could be instances of. So this is not a job posting. It is rather the job description from which job postings are derived.
Right. So you could imagine having a dozen job postings that all reference the same job. And what that allows you to do, if you were to fully implement that in a system, is maintain the actual data for the job, the description of it, what it requires, the competencies it has, and so on, as part of the job itself. And then your job postings become these sort of very lightweight things that just say, that job that's described over there is available, at this location, 9 to 5, whatever. This other job posting is, nights and weekends. It lets you separate the posting from the description of the job itself.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. That's really important to know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this, I think this is the next to last one here, work role. So not quite as many properties. Work role's position in that sort of hierarchy is just to be a collection of tasks. So it's not quite as heavy on the descriptive properties, but it does still have some as needed here. And if we go to task, so task is a little bit different in the set of properties that it has. You'll notice the various environmental hazard type, performance level type, physical capability type, and so on. Those do show up on the other classes, but here for tasks, they're probably a little more relevant in some cases at least, because a task can be more directly tied to some of those. And we'll go into what those all link to, because each of those links to what we call a concept, which I believe is on the next slide here. Yeah, so a concept scheme, as described here at the top, is a structured and predefined set of related terms that can be used for various purposes, such as search and discovery, creating predefined selection lists, and providing semantic meaning. So what that means is a concept scheme is essentially a controlled vocabulary of concepts, ideas, notions, whatever, that can be used to do things like build a checkbox list on a user interface, that can be used to say, this set of 10 different things all reference the same concept, so therefore those 10 different things have that particular concept in common. It's a way of reusing, of not only identifying, but also reusing a concept or a set of concepts altogether here. And so some examples of this down here at the bottom, environmental hazard type, you have the description for it there. performance level type, and so on. And generally speaking, in CTDL, anywhere you see a property that has type on the end of it, not always, but in most cases on the end of it, that will link either directly or indirectly to a concept from a concept scheme.
And again, every term in the CTDL is defined. And so these types, environmental hazard type, performance level, physical capability, and sensory capability, all have a definition. And what you're seeing here is verbatim the definition in the CTDL for each one of these types. So for describing a job, for example, if you wanted to describe a job that had performance level types, or physical capabilities, or environmental hazards, for example, you can include that information with the job. And here there's a note saying that publishers can upload their concept scheme. So for different types of jobs, say someone who deals in medical is going to have very different environmental hazards than someone who deals with, say, wildfires. So when publishing with the CTDL and publishing to the registry, you can publish your specific concept schemes or controlled vocabularies for how you describe things like an environmental hazard.
Right, and that also allows those to get reused among multiple different jobs, multiple different occupations, even if they're from different publishers. So you could have, say, a state publish their own list of here's the environmental hazard types recognized in this state, just as an example, and then all the different jobs, occupations, etc., from different publishers in that state, different universities, companies, and so on, could reference that list so that whenever someone is doing data analysis, whenever they're looking at it, they can say, oh, this hazard type, I recognize this, I saw this in this other job here. They can do that kind of thing with it to reuse those concepts.
Yeah, that reusability is really important with the CTDL.
And that avoids the problem of having 3 or 4 different ways of describing the same thing that really mean the same thing, but they're written slightly differently. Just it avoids problems like that, and also having to duplicate that data everywhere it shows up. All right, so the resources list here. So the CTDL schema, we often talk about the registry, but you can use CTDL outside of the registry. In fact, we encourage you to do so. We encourage you to use that within your systems, within your website, and so on. So that schema is available for anyone to use under an open Creative Commons license, as mentioned here. The technical site, credreg.net, that gives you all of our documentation about the schema. So that gives you the sort of really low-level nuts and bolts documentation of what each class and property and everything else means. It also gives you some slightly higher level stuff like the handbook and guidance and some of the same kinds of diagrams that we looked at earlier so that you can get a better understanding of how to use all of those pieces and parts to build something. There's no login or account required. It's all just there. It's open, available for you to use. And we have a list of some examples here at the bottom of some things that you could start building using CTDL to help you design the data modeling for databases, UIs, APIs, things like that.
Okay, let's just pause here for a moment and see, does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Or you can raise your hand. Are we seeing any questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Nate. We will move on to the next section. Job, occupation, work role and tasks, data publishing and consuming options. And I would like to turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about those options. Mike.
Hey, so there are various options for publishing information to the registry. As Nate noted, it doesn't have to exist in the registry, but for those who want to publish to the registry, there are 2 kind of main pathways. We have our assistant API, which is certainly recommended if you have data in a data store and you have resources able to format calls to the API. It's certainly the best way to get it in the registry. And if not, we have our manual publishing system where we offer bulk uploads. So for the API, there'll be links here to on credreg.net on how to format occupations, jobs, etc., as well as on GitHub. We try to spend more time on detailed information in GitHub and lighter information in CredRed. It's more flexible to have the ready to run examples in GitHub, where it has fully formatted. There's a separate project if you want to play with it and test running it. If you're not familiar with the API, it has a format option as well as a publish option. That way you can, via code or tools like Postman, test what publishing would look like in the registry. And there'll be on the right-hand side, there's links to information about the bulk upload. Julia will have a demonstration of that shortly. And if you're not familiar with the bulk upload, it allows you to specify the columns you're interested in. As noted, there's a lot of different properties in CTDL, and particularly for tasks, occupations, you're maybe only looking at a small subset of it. So you specify what you want, download a template, populate it, and then you can upload it and have it published from the publishing system. Next slide, please. Oh,
just another thing to mention before we go forward. This slide is really specific to jobs, occupations, work roles, and tasks. There's actually other tools available. One example I put in the chat is the badge publisher tool. So here we're really just focused on the work classes that we're talking about today. But we do have a page on our website where you can learn about all of the other publishing options, and it'd be great if someone could drop that in the chat. And I will move on to the next.
So we have a minimum data policy, and we have kind of the concept of application profiles. There'll be on credred.net, there may be more properties that you will see in the API. They may not have been identified as stable or maybe not high usage. So the minimum data policy will indicate what is required. The schema itself wouldn't indicate that, but as we see here, it's pretty small. That CTID, that's the global identifier used by all the top level classes in CTDL. Name, description, we always want to indicate who is defining this. So for a job, it's offered by, points to an organization. For other three, it's asserted by, points to an organization that is asserting the occupation, work role, and task. And then, as in the case for all other classes, we'd like to see the recommended information where possible, because that does provide much more information about the class being published or consumed for the registry.
And Mike, we didn't include all the other properties on here, but we have kind of 3 tiers with the minimum data policy of what's required. It absolutely has to be there to publish. What's recommended, as Mike said, we recommend having, more information that's helpful for to contextualize whatever is being described. But all of the other properties that you saw in the prior slides are also available, and they would be listed as optional. And one other thing to point out here with the CTID, a CTID, as Mike said, is a unique global identifier. It is used for all of the top level classes in the CTDL, including job, occupation, work role, and task. But with tools like the bulk upload, you don't have to create a CTID. The bulk upload will create the CTID for you. So it will assign the CTID through the bulk upload, but with publishing with the API, you would create your CTID. And we have a page that's all about CTIDs, and someone can drop that on the chat, into the chat. And if you're interested in learning more, you can take a look at that page.
For consuming data from the registry, there's different options. So depending on what your interest is, what your application might want to do, you can get it directly via CTID. There's separate URLs to get the resource, which is just the credential. If you get the graph, if that credential refers to other things called blank nodes, then you'll get that information as well. We have a very robust graph search available through the Credential Registry Search API. There's an option to download or import, and there are a few options available for that. You can download a list of all the JSON LD documents in a zip file, or we have a couple different projects available for downloading those things, those envelopes separately to the file system, or to put them in a database, or a more robust import, which will break them up into individual properties. And that's the tool that's used by the Credential Finder for importing data from the registry. In the credential finder, again, it's not meant to be pure end user application, but it's meant to show the data in the registry. So there's also widgets available. So an organization can set up a widget, and that way on a separate website, a way of showing just their data that's present in the credential finder.
Yeah, thank you for going over that, Mike. It's really important to know that, again, when data is published to the credential registry, it will show in the credential finder a tool for seeing all the data in the registry. But that data is really meant for other systems, applications, websites, student-facing tools, tools that are helpful to communities, to states, and so forth. That data is available, and you can see here that there are multiple options for utilizing that data with such a variety of tools. And we will move on to the introduction to the work classes bulk upload. And here I will turn it over to Julia.
Hi all. So this slide is just the overview of the steps to bulk upload that I will go over in the following slides, and of course in the bulk upload demonstration. So the first step after you set up and log into your account, you will select the CTDL terms to include with your template. You'll download the template, input your information into the template, and upload your data. The next step is to approve your data, whether it's jobs, occupations, work roles, or tasks. You'll just go to the organization summary page, select either the jobs, occupations, work role, or tasks tab, select all, and approve all selected items. And once you've approved that data, the publishing team will go in and publish your data to the Finder, where it will be publicly available. And you'll see that there is a little screenshot of what the data looks like in the Finder, and I will go over that in the demonstration in just a second here.
Yeah, and let me just point out at the bottom here of the slide, it says, note, this is a launch. So this is the first official launch of the availability of publishing occupations, jobs, work roles, and tasks. So that data is not currently in the registry. As soon as publishers begin to publish it, you'll see it in the Finder, and that data would be in the registry with all those consuming options available. And the screenshot over here on the bottom right side of the screen gives you an idea of what a job in this case would look like in the Credential Finder. And you'll notice it has a description, a link to the job, keywords, occupation, so a link to a standard occupation code in this case. And if we look over here, we can see that it's offered by an organization, and then we can see connections. It has a work role, it has some tasks, and it has competencies, and that's the ability embodied and the knowledge embodied. So it gives you an idea of what it would look like and how this matches up to the earlier slides that went over how jobs, occupations, work roles, and tasks relate and can link to each other, including to competencies. And Julia, should I go ahead and give you the screen share here?
That would be great. Right, so for this demo, I'm going to focus on occupations and tasks. So I will first show you how to upload your occupations to the publisher, and then I will demonstrate how to upload your tasks to the publisher, and then I will guide you through the process of approving your data for publication and show you how to access the published data in the Finder. So we'll begin with uploading occupations. So to begin uploading your occupations, you'll just go to the publisher. And once you're logged into the publisher, you'll see this navigation across the top. Select the Add New Bulk Upload dropdown and click on the white occupations link underneath Bulk CSV Upload. And this will take you to the occupation section of the Bulk Upload tool. And once you're on the Bulk Upload tool, you'll see Select Your Organization at the top of the page. And if you're only associated with one organization in our system, your organization will be automatically selected here. And you will not need to select anything from a dropdown. but if you're associated with multiple organizations in our system, you will need to select the appropriate organization from the dropdown. So I'm going to select the organization I'll be uploading data for, as I'm associated with multiple. And as you scroll down the page, you'll see an introduction with a brief overview of the steps to upload new occupations, as well as the steps to update existing occupations, should you need to edit any occupation data that you've already uploaded to the publisher. And over here, you'll see this print this page button, where you can print the steps to bulk upload should you need them. And just be sure to expand the sections that you need first so that those are captured in the printed PDF. And you'll also see this Contact Us button, where you can send us an email should you need help with the bulk upload tool. Moving down the page, you'll see this blue equity benchmark model, which was developed based on the final report of our Equity Council. And you'll see which properties on the bulk upload are part of which tier of the equity benchmark model based on the signal bars icon that is next to each property. So tier 1 properties are represented by a signal bars icon with 1 filled in bar. Tier 2 properties have 2 filled in bars. And tier 3 properties have 3 filled in bars. And moving down the page, you'll see step 1, complete your organization. If you expand this My Organizations tab, you'll see this edit button right over here where you can make any changes to your organizational information. You'll also see your organization's CTID, and your organization's addresses below. And to point to your organization in your spreadsheet, should you need the CTID, you can find it right here. And moving on to step 2, this is where you'll select your properties to be included in your template. You'll notice we have it selected to upload new occupations for this demo, but you can also update existing occupations once the data is in the registry. You'll see this Required Properties tab here that expands. And you'll see these properties are part of our minimum data policy and have been pre-selected for you over here. So they'll automatically be included in your spreadsheet when you download it. Since these properties are part of our minimum data policy and required to publish the registry, you'll see they're also part of our tier 1 equity benchmark data. So you'll see that little signals bar icon right next to each property. And to run through the required properties quickly, you'll see the resource name, description, and asserted by. And as I mentioned, they're automatically selected, so no need to worry about missing them from your spreadsheet. Looking at the minimum data, you'll see we have the property name in this column. We have a description of the property in this column, as well as an example of what data goes into that property. And we have special data requirements in this column on how to format the data in the spreadsheet if there are any. And now that we've gone over the required properties, we're going to go over some other properties that are past our minimum data policy and are available for you to include in your occupations upload. So expanding this recommended benchmark properties tab here, there's industry type, keywords, occupation type, subject web page, and has job. And you'll see each property has a description of what goes in that field, as well as an example, just as the required properties did. And there are some special data requirements with these properties. For example, industry type, keywords, and occupation type should be a pipe separated list of values. And these properties also have a character limit. And you'll notice that none of the properties past the minimum required data have been selected. So you have the ability to scroll through and select additional properties to include in your spreadsheet. And I'm going to check off subject web page. So that's included in my spreadsheet when I download it. Moving on to more properties that are past the minimum data policy, under optional properties, you'll see we have a lot underneath this tab, but I'm just going to point out a few properties here. So you'll see we have ability embodied right here, alternate name, coded notation, knowledge embodied, skill embodied, and has task, which is down here. And ability embodied, knowledge embodied, and skill embodied all require a CTID of a competency that has already been uploaded to the publisher. And you can find the CTIDs of your competencies by going to your summary page and just copy pasting those CTIDs into your spreadsheet. And has task requires a CTID of an existing task as well. And we'll get to the summary page where you can find these CTIDs a little later in this demonstration. Now, once you've selected all of your properties, you'll scroll down to step 3 to download your template spreadsheet. And just make sure to include sample data and include instructions so that those will be included in the template for your reference, and then you can click the download template spreadsheet button. And this template will download to your desktop as a CSV file. And you can convert the CSV to an Excel doc or a Google Sheet, as I did here. And so I've opened the template in Google Sheets to start inputting my data. You'll see sample data and instructions have been included in rows 2 and 3, so you can reference them in the spreadsheet and you don't have to keep going back to the bulk upload page. And you'll see in row 1, right here, that all of these column headers are the properties that were included in my spreadsheet. The minimum data is included as well as any other data that I've checked off. And going over to the completed spreadsheet, you will see that these columns over here, ability embodied and skill embodied, as well as knowledge embodied, have CTIDs of competencies that are already in the registry, as previously mentioned. And this column over here has CTIDs for tasks that are already in the registry. And once you're done filling out the template, you'll delete column A as well as sample data and instructions in rows 2 and 3. And those need to be removed before upload or you'll receive an error. It's also important to note to save the file as a CSV file, as that is the file extension that works with our system. So I've deleted column A as well as rows 2 and 3 from this completed spreadsheet. And I'm going to download as a CSV file. And I will go back to the bulk upload tool. And continuing down from the page from where we left off, step 4 has some helpful tips and tricks as you're inputting your data in your spreadsheet, but I've already inputted my data, so I will just scroll down to step 5. And this is where you will upload your data. So you'll select choose file and choose the file from your desktop. You'll select preview, and this will replicate your spreadsheet. You'll see the properties as your column headers and all of the data you've entered below. And you can use this as an opportunity to do a final quality check before uploading. And when you're done, you'll just click Save this data to the publisher. And it will let you know that it's processing your data. And it will give you an upload summary with the data that's been read, and what's been added, updated, and if there are any errors whatsoever. And now that we've had occupations uploaded, we have a result summary right here. I will show you how to upload tasks to the publisher. So going back up to the bulk upload, we'll click the tasks button to navigate to the tasks section of the bulk upload tool. And once you've clicked on tasks, you'll see the layout is the same. The task upload follows the same steps as the occupations upload, and of course also requires a spreadsheet. So I'm going to skip step 1 as well as the introduction, as it's the same step as the occupations upload. And scrolling down to step 2, you'll see the required properties tab, if you expand it, are also the same as the occupations upload. There's resource name, description, and asserted by. And the rest of the properties under the other tabs are very similar. And I will expand the recommended benchmark properties tab. There are just a few different options to select. So I'm going to select a couple of properties to include in our spreadsheet as I did with occupations. We'll select has occupation and has child. And has occupation allows you to connect a task to a related occupation. And this field requires you to provide the CTID for an occupation that has already been uploaded. And has child allows you to connect to show a hierarchical relationship with other tasks. And this will become more clear when I get to the completed spreadsheet. So coming down to step 3, this is where you'll download your template as you did with occupations. Remember to include sample data and include instructions, and then click the download template spreadsheet button. Again, this will download to your desktop as a CSV file, and you can convert to an Excel doc or Google Sheet to start inputting your data. And going over to the template I downloaded, I've opened it in Google Sheets. It has the same layout as the occupations template. You'll see that there are sample data and instructions in rows 2 and 3. For your reference, you don't have to keep going back to the upload page. In row 1, just as with the occupations template, all of the columns are the properties that were included in my spreadsheet. And you'll also see in the completed spreadsheet that I have over here that this has child column has CTIDs of tasks that are part of this task, which is the completion of all tasks associated with the actor occupation. So all of the CTIDs up here have been included in this column. And once you're done filling out the template, you'll just delete column A, which I've done, as well as sample data instructions in rows 2 and 3. You'll save as a CSV file, and you will go back to the bulk upload, scroll past step 4, scroll down to step 5. You'll select your file, and you can preview it as you did with the occupations, and then click Save this data to the publisher, and you'll receive an upload results summary with the data that's been read, added, updated, and if there are any errors. So once your data has been uploaded, the next step is to approve the data for your occupations and tasks in the summary page. So under step 6, you'll see there's a link to your organization summary page. You'll click on that link and you'll be redirected to the summary page in the publisher. Now, this is where you can see all of the data that you've uploaded to the publisher. You'll see a tab for occupations as well as a tab for tasks. You'll select the occupations tab. You can select all and select this approve all selected items button right here down at the bottom. And you'll repeat this with the tasks tab. So you can select all, approve all selected items. And clicking that approve all selected items button lets the publishing team know that you've approved your data to be published. They'll go in and do a quality check of the data you've approved and then publish your data to the registry. And once your data is published, you'll be able to see it in the Finder. I have a couple pages open in our Sandbox Finder. So this is the occupation in the Finder. You'll see there's a description, a subject web page right here, SOC codes, coded notation down here, and alternate names. And you'll see it's also connected to a task, and it's connected to abilities, those competencies that were already in the registry, and skills as well, some more competencies. And I also have the task open in the Finder. You'll see it has connections to 19 children, those other tasks that were in our spreadsheet. And it also has a connection to the actor occupation that I just showed. And that is how to upload occupations, upload tasks, approve your data to be published, and view your published data in the Finder. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to contact the publishing team. And that email is publishing@credentialengine.org. And I will pass it back to Jeannie to close this out.
You're muted, Jeannie.
Sorry. Both of the demos that Julia just did are available on YouTube, so you can watch them at your leisure and share them with others. And in closing out the webinar, first, I would like to see if there are any questions that anybody has about any of the content that we went over. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you could raise your hand. We are accessible as well. So after this webinar, if you have any questions, as Julia noted, you can email us. Feel free to contact us. The email is here on this closing slide. We answer emails. We try to answer them on same business day as we receive them. But concluding this webinar, the tools that we went over today are available for you to use. So the first step is to create your credential registry account. There are no fees or anything like that to create your account or to use the publishing tools that we went over today. So for example, you can begin using the bulk upload immediately following this webinar. We have a web page with the information from this webinar, and we will be putting the recording of this webinar as well on that page. So that page is available now, but we will be adding the recording to it. And that is where also you will find the YouTube videos that of the demonstration that Julia just did, as well as instructions to get you started. And if there aren't any questions, the Credential Engine team would like to thank everyone for joining us today. We truly appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you on getting those jobs, occupations, work roles, and tasks published to begin building robust learning to working pathways for everyone. Thank you.